We'll give it like 1 more minute and then we can start. All right, we will go ahead and start. So good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Keller, and I am the Senior Development Manager for the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County. Thank you so much for joining our town hall today. It's really hard to believe that it's been more than a year since all of this unfolded, and I could not be more proud of the Food Bank team for their incredible accomplishments and commitments to keeping our community fed. There's a few housekeeping points. Eric, thank you. If you could please keep yourself on mute. And we recommend that you put yourself on speaker view because we are going to be having a virtual tour of our warehouse, and that's just going to be the best way for you to be able to see that. This call is being recorded, so if you would like to not be recorded, just take yourself off camera. And then lastly, please put your questions in the chat and we will answer them at the end. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our 3 speakers: Eric Talkin, our Chief Executive Officer; Paul Wilkins, our Chief Operations Officer; and Lacey Valdiviez, Director of Programs and Education. And with that, Eric, I will pass the mic to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. So these are the heroes who are going to be speaking to you today. So I want to just spend a minute to just talk about what happened, what the food bank was like before COVID and our focus. Really, the food bank is not just there to provide food for people in time of need, although that is a core function. We're really trying to use that food to make a more lasting change in people's life. So we operate with something called food literacy, which is building people's skills around food so that they can be healthy if they don't have that much money for food that month. So we use our food as a way of building community and really trying to make the food bank a hub for food activities in the entire county. So I'm glad to say that our vision was not kind of knocked sideways by COVID, but we certainly had to change a lot of things. So the way that we were operating pre-COVID, excuse me, we have a warehouse in Santa Maria, which is our hub, the larger warehouse, and then a smaller one in Goleta, you can see on the bottom right there. And so pre-COVID, we were shipping around 10 million pounds of food a year. And I'm glad to say that half of that is fresh produce, and really serving a network of over 300 nonprofit agencies across the county. So all your favorite other nonprofit organizations come to us to get their food and then distribute it or use it in programs. But we also run our own programs ourselves, distribution programs, education programs, to really make sure that there's comprehensive coverage across the entire county. So pre-COVID, we were serving 1 in 4 residents in the county, and an incredible 41% of those are kids. So we might be serving them in a small way in terms of providing some fruit or produce for an after school or a preschool program, right through to seniors who need a lot of long-term support and assistance. But it's always been our philosophy that touching that many people in the county allows us to do something different, which is to really shift the overall nutritional health and therefore the overall health of the people that we work with. Because if we can shift that health of 1 in 4 people in the county, we're going to make an enormous difference. And often that 1 in 4 is someone whose health is more compromised than other people. So we really see ourselves as a public health organization using food as our tool to make long-term changes in people's health and life. So COVID came along and we had to really very quickly change what we were doing. We're all familiar with the changes to COVID. We all know people in our own families and our extended circles of people who just lost their job overnight. I had 3 of my kids lost their job in a matter of weeks. So that has really been hitting people. And I think also everyone in the county began to understand a little bit about what it is to be food insecure, to not be certain where your food's going to be coming from for the rest of the month. So we all remember standing in line outside Costco. We all remember going to Trader Joe's and the bread shelf is totally cleared out. So I'm hoping that after COVID, people will remember that feeling and really understand that this is something that we need to eradicate across our county. So we've seen huge unemployment, we've seen crippling underemployment, and then seniors, our most vulnerable population, have been having to stay at home. So food banks have typically been predicated on the idea that you take a large amount of food, you bring it somewhere, and then get a large amount of people to congregate and pick up that food. So as you can imagine, that's the opposite of what you would want to do during COVID. So we really had to change our distribution models. Paul will be touching on that in a minute. And then the schools were closing as well. And the schools have always been a key conduit for us to work with both kids and families by providing food, by providing education. So we've had to work around that. And then also the idea of home distribution. Typically, we weren't in the home delivery business. It was not efficient for us. But with so many seniors at home, with so many immunocompromised people, we really had to flip our schedule and our approach. And we've really made some changes, which we think we're going to stick with post-COVID. So the reason that we are on this call, I'm going to just end this so that someone else can take that over. So we're here to really try and understand what the food bank's response has been to COVID, and then to get a clearer idea of what we're going to do going forward to make sure that Santa Barbara County can recover from the crisis that we've been through. And to do that, we don't want just me like rabbiting on and on and on. We thought it's much more interesting to let's look at the people who are coordinating the response. So Paul is our director of operations. So he is making sure that the food is going out of the warehouse. He supervises the relationships with our member agencies. And then Lacey is in charge of our programmatic efforts, which include food distribution, but also crucially making sure that we found a way to keep our educational mission going in a hybrid form during COVID. So let's start off and take it away, Paul.
Thank you, Eric. And just give me a moment here and I'll share my screen for the slides. Can everyone see that? All right, thumbs up from Natalie. Days before March 11th last year, the food bank started implementing changes as expectations rose that COVID would reach pandemic levels. Operationally, we put in place social distancing, health screenings, and acquired large amounts of personal protective equipment. Our warehouses transitioned from allowing visitor, volunteer, and agency at-will access to restricting it to only staff and pre-screened trained volunteers. By March 12th, we had started preparing to open 54 emergency food distribution sites, which came to form our Safe Access to Food for Everyone, or Safe FoodNet program. Starting on March 24th, these sites opened and provided emergency in-person and drive-through food distributions where pre-packaged boxes of food and fresh produce were distributed with socially distanced and PPE wearing volunteers. The new pre-pack program was also a new process that was implemented and continues today. We wrapped up the program quickly to create an assorted food inventory for emergency distributions and increase the amount of direct home deliveries to families quarantining due to COVID. Each week, a group of volunteers arrived at our North and South County warehouses and packed up to 6,000 boxes in order to eliminate the handling of food at our distribution sites and increase social distancing, thus reducing the risk of close contact and exposure to our agencies and our clients. To date, we've built nearly 160,000 boxes, equaling over 3 million pounds for an initial cost of $70,000, not including food. On March 19th, we activated our Disaster Feeding Plan Task Force, along with our Feeding Task Force co-leads, the Red Cross and the Salvation Army. In addition, we partnered with the Santa Barbara County Office of Emergency Management, the Public Health Department, Department of Social Services, and city jurisdictions throughout the county. The task force was charged with the responsibility to create and coordinate response as partners in order to augment and support feeding operations so that the feeding capacity and the scope of operations was sufficient to address the feeding needs of the COVID-19 response. The task force immediately convened and almost all partners reported client services had increased 2 times or more within the past 7 days. The food bank immediately increased food to our FTF partners and worked with the county to assist individuals and families that were sheltering at home or in hotels due to COVID. From the period of March 9th through what's considered the first stage of the pandemic, roughly late spring, early summer of 2020, the food bank distributed 6.2 million pounds of food. We increased the amount of food going out the door by double almost immediately from the start of the pandemic, as the economic impact was swift with the closing of Santa Barbara County's businesses. Not only was additional warehouse and equipment essential to our increased work, but also was the need for more staff support. On March 27th, California National Guard assigned 20 guardsmen at a Point Mugu Naval Air Base to begin assisting us with skilled support needed to work in our warehouses and assist with distribution deliveries. Today, we have the support of 8 guardsmen at our Santa Barbara warehouse and 10 at our Santa Maria warehouse. We anticipate having this support through September of this year as they continue to serve in support of our logistics by operating forklifts, receiving food and packaging boxes, as drivers for home deliveries, delivering food to distribution sites, and as volunteer leaders at our safe food net locations. In the month of March 2020, the amount of food we distributed increased from a monthly average of roughly 600,000 pounds to over 1 million pounds. In April, it rose to 1.6 million pounds. While this tidal wave of demand came towards us, we quickly started feeling the effects of decreases in corporate food supplies. As grocery stores experienced hoarding and supply chain constriction, food manufacturing ground down due to factory closures, our corporate retail food donations were cut in half. As a food bank in time of disaster, we rely on increased government support food supply chains to help close the gap. Unfortunately, our main supply of this type of food, the USDA, was very slow to act, not coming to our aid until they created the Farmer to Family Food Box program in May. In order to close the gap, the food bank increased its purchased food inventory by nearly 40%, spending over $600,000 to obtain food staples such as rice and beans, canned protein, and fresh produce. In partnership with our national network of food banks through Feeding America, we were able to source 35 truckloads of donated food, nearly 1.5 million pounds from donors throughout the United States. With all the additional food, there came the need for additional warehouse space. With the help of the city of Goleta in the south and Pacific Real Estate Group in the north, we were able to obtain low-cost temporary lease space. Our temporary offsite warehouse located at the old Direct Relief building near the Amtrak station in Goleta was expanded from 35,000 square feet to 29,000 square feet, as you can see here. We obtained an additional 4,800 square feet of warehouse space at Thompson Avenue in Santa Maria. Both these locations were critical in providing us with the space to conduct our pre-pack operations. Additionally, we obtained off-site freezer storage by partnering with Lineage Logistics in Santa Maria to store up to 160,000 pounds of high-quality fresh protein acquired through Feeding America, which tripled our storage capacity. As was the case with our Thomas Fire and debris flow response, our COVID response once again shined the light on our need for a larger warehouse located on the South Coast. It will be the future home of our pre-packed food operations, where we will be able to stockpile inventory in order to quickly respond to future disasters. Our current South County warehouse is woefully undersized, with a capacity to only store 15% of the food needed to serve the area. With all the county's emergency food response organizations depending upon the food bank for food in the event of a disaster, a new warehouse is needed to store over 750,000 pounds of food that could be made immediately available for distribution, even prior to the arrival of National Guard or FEMA. This next slide summarizes what we've done since the start of our active COVID response on March 9th, 2020. So far, we have eclipsed 20 million pounds of food. We have distributed 200% of what we have distributed over the same time span between 2019 and 2020. We received a 50% increase in no-cost food donations, 7.5 million pounds of which came from our local agriculture industry, grocery retail, and individual donors in our county. We distributed over 4 million pounds of the USDA Farmer to Family Food Box program. And I'm proud to say currently on hand, we have a very healthy inventory supply. If we were not to receive 1 more pound of food as of today, we would have 20 days of supply on hand, happily stored at our multiple warehouse locations. As part of our response, we expensed nearly $750,000 on capital leases for forklifts, refrigerated trailers, and warehouse equipment to support the doubling of our warehouse space. Since March of last year, we've spent nearly $10,000 in increasing space for social distancing, purchased $123,000 in warehouse equipment, purchased 4 trucks and 1 van for over $545,000, and spent nearly $55,000 in equipment leases. So what does the future hold? We're facing a lot of uncertainty in regard to the future supply of USDA commodities in the Farmer to Family Food Box Program. The Food Box Program is scheduled to end at the end of April, and USDA deliveries have decreased as food manufacturers are still struggling to recover from the challenges of increased consumer demand and supply chain challenges. In an average year, our food distribution by category averages 60% donated, 25% USDA, and 15% purchased. Since the start of COVID, donation has accounted for 40%, USDA has gone up to 45%, and purchase remains at 15%. In order to avoid a possible USD food cliff, we are sourcing more food through Feeding America's food supply chain, working with their Choice Food Donation Program and the Produce Matchmaker Program. We're working with the California Association of Food Banks Farm Worker Program, as Lacey will describe later. And we're partnering with our Dare to Share California Food Bank Network to source truckloads of donated food. While corporate retail donations have had a resurgence, we are constantly monitoring the food supply chain with the anticipation that we may need to spend more on purchased food inventory in order to maintain our elevated levels of distribution for what we think is another 12 to 18 months until the economic and unemployment impacts start to decrease. With a countywide unemployment rate of 7.7%, the need is still great. The pre-pack program is here to stay as one of the shining examples of how the food bank can quickly pivot and be resilient during times of disaster. In the future, our pre-pack food box program will transition into our food bank food box, and we'll begin stockpiling for future disasters. We will also be expanding our distributions to include Saturday distributions in areas where there is the greatest need. This project will be rolled out over the next couple of months. In close, I'd like to do a shout out to our operations team. What they've done in the past year is nothing short of miraculous. They have done it safely while staying healthy and remain committed to the mission of our organization. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask that Laurel join us for what will be a brief virtual tour of our warehouse in Santa Maria. Can we blow up the picture from the warehouse tour?
Oh, sorry, Alex, if you could stop sharing your screen for this part.
There we go. For those of you who have never been to our North County facility, this is just inside the main warehouse area as you enter in through our front lobby. Off to the left, you can see pallets racked full of food that's either been procured by purchasing or through the USDA or through donated. The pallet of produce there came from the California Association of Food Banks as part of their Farmer to Family program for fresh produce. We warehouse in this facility roughly 750,000 pounds of inventory. This gives us a wealth of supply to be redistributed throughout the county. We, as Eric mentioned earlier, we receive all our large major deliveries at this facility and then reroute what is needed for the South Coast using daily transfers. So as Laurel is making her way back to the east side of the warehouse, that large metal box you see in front of you is our cooler freezer. It has roughly the capacity to store about 6 truckloads of various temperature controlled food items. This is the entrance into our cooler here, where the vast majority of our produce is stored, which typically we go through the entire inventory of produce within this warehouse within the matter of about a couple of days. There are faithful National Guardsmen at work helping build pallets. Can't sing their praise enough to what they've been able to add from the staffing resource point. And this is our reclamation salvage area. So I mentioned earlier our grocery retail program, our retail partnership donation program. This is where when we go to the grocery stores and pick up donations, they are brought back here where they are sorted by various food categories and then set up for distribution to our agencies. So, plan and action. I believe that was the end of the tour. Thank you again for your time today. And now I'll hand off to Lacey.
Thank you, Paul. That was great to go on a virtual tour of the warehouse. Nice to see it again. I'm just going to take a few minutes to tell you all about 3 programs we wanted to highlight that really feature what we were able to do during the COVID response. And I'm so happy to take questions. So please, if you have any, do use the chat. Eric mentioned during his introduction about our older adult nutrition program and what we did during COVID to keep them safe. As you know, going to grocery stores, there was so much unknown, so much concern for this group. So one of the first immediate responses we did was transition our what we call congregate sites to home delivery. So we had about 1,100 seniors we were serving through that program, and all of them immediately transitioned to home delivery. We used volunteers and tons of different partnerships to be able to do that. And actually, because of that unknown and kind of the risk of adverse events related to COVID-19 transmission for this group, we opened it up to anyone 55 and older having a disability or over 60. Anyone who needed to receive our food at home could call in and get enrolled in our ongoing program, so they would receive recurring home deliveries. As a result, we are continuing that program for now, and we have completed over 60,000 home deliveries. On the next slide, you'll see something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. This is an example of a Guards member making a home delivery to one of our seniors. And there was a time during the pandemic when we were short on volunteers. And so I was needed to do a route, and there's about 10 deliveries on the route, and got to wear my Foodbank shirt, and it says COVID-19 Response Task Force. And it was very special that I went to a lot of mobile homes. In fact, I think mostly mobile homes, and every single home that saw me, like got the chance to kind of recognize me and what I was doing, pretty much everyone did some sort of acknowledgement of gratitude. Like they'd knock on the window and wave, or if they could, they would yell out, "Thank you," or "God bless you." And throughout the majority of the pandemic, our team would receive voicemails from seniors who would just call in and leave a message to us of how grateful they were for the food bank and to be able to safely receive food. We even got some handwritten notes where, it's done in cursive and it's a little bit shaky. And to be honest, it was a little hard to read, but really that energy of gratitude that this population and this program in particular provided was really something that kept myself and our team and even our partners going. So something unexpected as a result of the pandemic was I really found a newfound appreciation for our older adults in our community and for this program in particular. And so I'm really excited that we're keeping that home delivery higher level of service going, and the food bank will continue to look for more ways to include more seniors in our nutrition program and more opportunities to get food to them. But the seniors were not the only ones that we served. Can go to the next slide, please. COVID-19 shone a light on other areas of our community that really needed support, and one of them was our agricultural workers. We created this food access program for farm workers. We serve about 200 families each week. We've served over 23,000 people to date through this program. And what's really special about this is the way that we were able to tie in education during COVID-19 was both our nutrition education, but also with this partnership with community health centers. So they were able to work with us to provide PPE to farm workers through the program and also PPE education. And together, we were able to reduce the transmission rate of COVID-19 among farm workers from 18% to 4%. And I think this is just a tremendous example of how important food programs are, especially in this case as a vehicle to meeting some of our larger goals and working closely with public health department and partners such as this. The way that we remove barriers to access for ag workers in this program is we eliminated the need for transportation by bringing food directly to their neighborhoods on a recurring basis. So it's kind of a mobile program that moves around each week. We also hold the hours later in the day so that to accommodate their working hours. Normally we have distribution throughout the day, right? That's when the food bank is working. But for this program, we make a special exception so that they can get off work and pick up their families and get to the program or get to that site in their neighborhood. We also go the extra mile as far as education. We have peer educators who are trained with our nutrition messages, and they provide that in both Spanish and Mixteco, which is not a written language. So over the next few slides, you'll see some images of how we were able to do education safely with social distancing and also with more graphics so that it's not so text heavy as education tends to be. So these are just some examples of what the program looks like across different sites. Here's an example of the social distancing and the graphics that are used from the peer educators. And then we just have folks of all different ages who attend and families of all different sizes. So this program is open to anyone, but it's particularly useful for those in the neighborhood. But at the food bank, we are always strategizing, as Eric mentioned, on how to really combat long-term food insecurity. So one way we do that is by working really closely with schools. We have a program called Healthy Community Pantries, which I'll give you a little more information about. And during COVID-19, we were able to lean on those school district partnerships that we already have established and get out food boxes to families in need who were attending to pick up their school supplies, or if they're on the free and reduced lunch program, they were able to get groceries from us to take home to their families as well. So what does the future look like? We are very excited to be opening 6 new healthy school pantries across the county. We have identified 3 in South County and 3 locations in North County. We targeted these locations based on rates of poverty that are reported in the census data. And we also confirmed the school locations based on rates of free and reduced lunch uptake at those schools. We focus on communities of color and also areas of disproportionate poverty. The other thing to note is these programs are open not only to the children at those schools, to their families and extended families, and also seniors or anyone else in the neighborhood who can make it to that location. This is just a quick look at the distribution of the locations we either have or are planning across the county. So you can see they're grouped in areas of higher population density. We have Guadalupe, a couple in Santa Maria, a couple in Lompoc, Isla Vista, Goleta, and then several in Santa Barbara, like the east side and the west side. This is also a quick snapshot of the school district partnerships and what we were able to do with them during the COVID-19 pandemic to get the food boxes to the lower income families in need. With Goleta Union School District, we served over 100,000 pounds. With Santa Barbara Unified, we did about 11,000 pounds. For Santa Maria Bonita, we did a holiday program so people could have food while they were away from school or possibly traveling. And then also for Lompoc, we served over 200,000 pounds of food. So as I mentioned, we're looking to open 6 new healthy community pantries. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about that program. Education and resources are key to these programs. It's not just food access. So They include things like health screenings, access to CalFresh benefits, which are incredibly important right now, recipe demonstrations and recipe tastings, and all different types of community services. We bring in partners who can provide that. This is just an example of what it looks like. It has a health fair style approach. So we bring in expert partners. This is an example of a public health expert giving a lesson on rethink your drink and sugars in foods. So they bring in engagement activities, they bring in their resources, education, and all of that is alongside the nutrition education that we normally provide, as well as the food. So again, building that community around food and food literacy education. I also have a list here of just examples of partners, things like dental care, immigrant services, access to domestic violence solutions, federal benefits like CalFresh and Public Health Department. We also provide disaster preparedness training and food boxes and things for disasters at these programs. This is a quick look at all of the children's programs that we have. We start as early as preschool. We have a kids farmers market program for elementary school. In the middle school age, we start getting kids excited about cooking and actually building skills in the kitchen. Right before the pandemic, we launched a high school program called Food Creativity Lab. That got put on hold after only one class, sadly, but we are looking forward to relaunching that again once it's safe to do so. In the summer, we offer a picnic in the park program, which serves lunches to children every single weekday who may not have access to the school lunch program anymore while they're out of school. And then lastly is the Healthy School Pantry, which I have told you about. COVID also challenged us to pivot away from an in-person learning model to a distance learning model. So we have created things like videos, we use Zoom and interactive Pear Deck. It's a PowerPoint tool to interact with children over Zoom. We're building an online curriculum for both children and for adult education around nutrition. We created workbooks, take-home kits, and we always provide all of our education in both English and Spanish. Mixteco where necessary as well. And then lastly, I just have an example of one of the activities to kind of capture one of the nutrition messages that we teach. This is for Kids Farmers Market, which is elementary school. And the message here is teaching kids the difference between foods in their natural states, processed foods, and ultra processed foods, and encouraging them to choose foods in their natural states more often. You can see it's in both English and Spanish. And this activity is a coloring activity, which then they cut out and use as flashcards, kind of a trivia game to interact with peers. And so that's just a quick look at education and programs. Again, I'd love to take any questions you have. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Eric to talk more about our next steps.
Great, thank you so much, Lacey, and thank you, Paul. So that's a pretty exhaustive view of what our response has been. So we really feel that this year has certainly stretched the organization significantly. We've doubled in terms of our output. We've doubled in terms of the amount of staff, whether they're paid or unpaid, that we're working with. But we really feel that we're now focusing on a clear strategy for the next 24 months. Clearly, we see a gradual economic recovery. But realistically, many jobs are not coming back, and those that do typically have less hours. So people are really scrambling, and they're in a situation where they have huge debts as a result of COVID. They have to pay rent, et cetera, that they haven't been able to pay. And then they're having to do that with less hours. So it's an incredible uphill scramble for people. And unfortunately, healthy food is the first thing to get cut from people's budget. So that's really where we need to step in and help people and make sure that they can make that climb up and are able to help Santa Barbara County recover. So we envisage about an 18-month period from now that will continue with high need along the levels that we're seeing now. And then we estimate that it will begin to taper off after that point. I don't know whether people saw this morning in the New York Times, there was an excellent article on the food bank response nationally, and particularly looking at the Chicago Food Bank in terms of our response. But that has a really interesting view of just what's been happening and what will happen in the future. So definitely check that out if you haven't been able to. So we need to be able to respond to the pandemic, but we also need to prepare for future disasters. It feels for all of us like these things seem to be coming a little more quicker than they used to. But clearly we have to be ready for a significant earthquake to take place. We all saw what happened with just the 101 being pinched off at one point. It was really hard for us. We had to serve our carpinteria agencies by resupplying from the Ventura Food Bank. But if there is a significant earthquake, then there will be multiple breaks in the road. We won't be able to bring food down from our distribution point in the Santa Maria warehouse to the South County. So we're on an urgent hunt at the moment for a new South County warehouse that's large enough for us to be able to store enough food to get this community through the first few days of a disaster, because significant resupply of food is not going to come during that period. In our discussions with the Office of Emergency Management, basically they've said, well, there is no plan for resupply by water, for instance, to Santa Barbara. So it's going to take a while for those things to swing into action. We also estimate that there are tens of thousands of people who are going to be stuck in Santa Barbara. People come here every day. They come as visitors. They come as commuters to work here. Those people aren't going to get home, and they're going to get hungry very quickly. So there is a real need for us to be able to store enough food for multiple days here in the South County so that we can distribute it. So that's why we need to find this new warehouse and really help us to respond to COVID, but then also to be ready for a significant disaster. So, I mean, the support of everyone on this call has been absolutely outstanding. It's been crucial for us to actually be able to bring a strategic response to the crisis rather than just kind of running around and providing food where we can. And it's really set us up to prepare to meet this long tail of kind of economic challenge that we see in the wake of the pandemic. So that's a lot of us kind of sharing with you what we're doing. I would love to hear people's viewpoints, people's questions about, how we can be more responsive. So thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Eric. I did see a question in the chat from Bobby Thompson. Is the RX program on Fridays continuing in Santa Maria?
Thanks. Yeah, Bobby brings up, we have a food RX program, food prescription program partnered with SenCal Health, and it is for food insecure families with an obese child. So that's actually a research program that we're doing to see if a fruit and vegetable intervention for these families can lower the BMI of the children. So yes, that program is ongoing. We have about 80 participants and they're enrolled for 6 months. So we'll have that through about the fall time of this year. And if it works, if we see a positive result, we will keep it going.
Thanks, Lacey. Anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask? I have a question for you, Eric. How do you think COVID-19 will change the way that food banking looks like in the future?
Well, we've seen a number of changes already. We had to respond initially when a lot of our 300 plus member agencies, probably a dozen or so, were not able to function as they were before, because a lot of their volunteers or the people that made the organization go were in the highest need, vulnerability area. So we've seen a shift from our agencies to be more accepting of pre-packed food from us rather than coming to the warehouse and making kind of micro level choices about the type of food. But we really see ourselves as part of the broader economic solution to pulling the county out of this economic problem. If people have enough money for healthy food, or if they don't have enough money for healthy food, then we can provide that food, which enables them to get back on their feet. And it's going to raise the economic benefit of everyone in the county. So we see food banking really, this food bank expanding our services, expanding our educational services, just trying to build that resiliency to future disasters or future problems.
Thank you. And Lacey, a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about what the typical food bank client looked like before and how COVID-19 changed that? I know you touched a little bit on the farm workers program, but can you touch a little bit more on some of the other clients that we've seen since this pandemic?
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to maybe capture one particular change because we have seen changes in all of the population. So as I mentioned, our service to older adults has increased threefold. We see families who have lost work and have never received food bank services before. We recently did a survey and it was like 70% of people attending the distribution were not enrolled in the CalFresh benefits. So they're people who are seeking our services for the first time. And many of the clients that we're seeing right now are families. So families with children working or previously working that are, just reaching out for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's been an amazing change that we have seen. So many people who are even supporters of the food bank are now requiring our services. And, that's what a food bank should be there. You make deposits of money, you make deposits of food when times are good, and then you make a withdrawal when times are bad. And it certainly has been an eye-opener for a lot of people in the community who, as Lacey said, have never needed our services before. But so many people are stuck in this trap that if you're going to get CalFresh benefits or food stamps, you have to be really right on the poverty line. You can't have any significant assets. And most people are not in such a bad situation as that, but they're also urgently needing food and don't have enough money for it. So it's really targeting those families that the food bank is there for.
There's a question in the chat from Jeff. Do homeless people visit the food bank?
Sure. Well, nobody visits food banks, not that we're mean, but they come and volunteer. But individual members of the community don't come to the food bank. We're kind of a distribution center. We bring the food out to our programs or to member agencies' programs. And a number of those agencies focus especially on homelessness, whether it's the PATH homeless shelter there, where in fact I worked there for 7 years prior to being at the food bank, or the street medicine, the doctors that go out and provide. So we provide a lot of services for homeless people, but often you get the perception that the bulk of people who access the food bank service are homeless, and the reality is that it's probably around 2 or 3%. Homeless people are very visible in certain parts of Santa Barbara County, but we're really trying to grapple with the invisible nature of hunger of so many families who really don't have enough.
Thanks, Eric. And I have one final question for Paul. You've mentioned a little bit about how food sourcing kind of became a challenge during the height of the pandemic. Can you just further explain a little bit about that and kind of talk about how relationships are changing in the future with food sourcing?
Yeah, sure. It really came down to two aspects of the supply chain and the increased demand at the consumer level. I mentioned the hoarding that I think everybody, and Eric touched at the top of this meeting, that we all saw and then we were all subject to. That put a major strain on the food supply chain when you faced a holiday type demand for food inventory around the holidays over an 8-12 month period of time. Our food systems, our food supply chains are not built to operate at that capacity. In addition to that, there was an aluminum shortage that occurred that really constricted manufacturing processing in the way of canned food items. And so a number of those things went in the toilet very quickly as far as what we could source quickly. So we had to pivot and look at what was available. And really what was available were items in bulk type size packaging that you see, your common grains, dried beans, and the like, that really kind of became the life hold that helped get us through the fact that we couldn't source as much fresh protein as we would like to, which was a main avenue for that was through our grocery retail sector. But as you all know, proteins were highly sought after during the hoarding period that we faced. So what we really do expect to look to size up more is our relationship with the corporate retail sector. There's a huge effort by Feeding America right now to work more diligently with the USDA as well as their food sourcing. They're struggling to get back on pace with providing with our normal USDA deliveries, basically because the manufacturer sector is still strained. But they're doing a lot of work to try to put food banks at the front of the line with regards to getting access to that food before and separating it from the typical retail food supply chain. So it's dedicated and isolated exclusively for food banks. So that's the hope.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions? I know we are all Zoom fatigued, so I want to be mindful of that. I also wanted to thank everyone for attending today and for being a supporter of the food bank. We really could not do it without your support. So thank you very much. If you have any further questions, don't feel like you can't reach out. I'll pop my email in the chat right now. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone.